Good morning. My name is Carrie Cannon. I'm a member of the Kiowa tribe, and I'm an ethnobotanist with the Hualapai Indian tribe of northwestern Arizona. Today I'll be sharing a presentation along with my friend and colleague, Jorigine Paya, a member of the Hualapai tribe, an ethnobotanical perspective of several Colorado Plateau plants. I first came to the Hualapai Reservation 19 years ago as a wildlife biologist, and I was in charge of helping manage the big game species on the reservation, including doing surveys of the desert bighorn sheep, the elk, and the antelope. And it was through that position that I actually took a greater interest in learning about the plants. And so eventually I was able to get support from the tribe to create an intergenerational ethnobotanical program where we could have elders formally teach the ethnobotanical plant knowledge to the next generation of tribal youth. On a personal note, I feel very blessed to be doing the work that I do at Hualapai. As I look back at my own heritage, on both sides of my family, both my mother and father's side, I have relatives that have been deeply involved with plants. And so in this photo in the upper right, these are my German relatives. My grandfather is the little boy in the photo, and they're standing in a greenhouse. This photo was taken in Germany, and they reared plants for a livelihood. And then they immigrated to the United States, where my grandfather grew up, to continue on this tradition, and growing plants in his greenhouse was his livelihood. And then on my father's side, I have both Kiowa and Oglala Sioux ancestry. Sioux from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and Kiowa from Oklahoma. And the photo in the lower left is my great-great-grandmother, Spotted Wing. She was a plant medicine person for the Kiowa people. So as I reflect on my own life and the work that I do at Hualapai, it's kind of a continuation of what has been in my family lineage. Our ethnobotany youth program has been active for the last 18 years, and it's been largely successful due to the knowledgeable tribal elders that have shared their vast knowledge with the tribal youth. It's a field trip based program, so we go out harvesting when the plants are in season, we collect the plants, and then we bring them back to the cultural center where they're prepared in a traditional manner. Just to orient you, I'll show you on the map on the left, you see the federally recognized tribes of Arizona. And in the upper left-hand corner, you see a horseshoe shape. That's the Hualapai Indian Reservation, which is 1 million acres, and it follows 108 miles of the western stretch of the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River. And just northeast of Hualapai Reservation is the Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument, which you can see in the central slide. And to the right, you'll see the larger Colorado Plateau region, which is the plants that we will be sharing about today. So one might ask, what is special and amazing about the Colorado Plateau and Grand Staircase-Escalante? For a few examples, it's a botanically rich area. Approximately 84% of the plants found in Utah can be found within the monument. Also, it's a rich landscape and diverse. It's diverse in elevation, topography, and soil types. It also has high rates of plant endemism. The Colorado Plateau is home to one of the highest levels of plant endemism, with 1 out of every 10 plants being found nowhere else in the world. From a landscape perspective, you can think of the monument as having 3 distinct features: the Grand Staircase, the Kaiparowitz Plateau, and the canyons of the Escalante River. These 2 visual diagrams show a nice perspective of how to think of the Grand Staircase. In the first section, you see sort of a slice viewpoint, and in the lower slide, you see sort of an aerial viewpoint. But as you move northeast from the Grand Canyon, you see a series of 5 different major sedimentary layers that comprise the staircase. Within the monument, you also have the Kaiparowitz Plateau, which represents some of the uplift and a 50-mile region of plateau lands. You also have the many different beautiful canyons of the Escalante River. The Colorado Plateau region is home to many different tribes, including the Havasupai, the Hualapai, the Navajo, the various southern Paiute tribes, the Pueblo tribes, the Hickory Apache, and others. Today we'll be sharing ethnobotanical uses of 7 different Hualapai plants used within the plateau. The vial, or also known as Mescal agave, also is called century plant by some. It was once thought that this plant takes 100 years to bloom, so its name in that sense is a little bit of a misnomer, but the agave utahensis that grows on the Hualapai Reservation takes about 40 years to bloom. The species is monocarpic, meaning that it blooms just once in its lifetime and then it dies. The agave plant also has the ability to reproduce through clonal root shoots. This is an important adaptation because when we harvest the plants for food, we harvest it before the flowering blossom fully emerges. It's only at this life stage that the base part of the plant begins to produce sugars that eventually migrate up the flowering stalk to produce nectar. Agave utahensis is generally harvested mid-March to mid-April. It's found along the western section of the Colorado Plateau. The green leaves are cut off until the white heart emerges. In the pit roasting process at Hualapai, a barrel cactus is harvested as well. And this is the thorns are shaved off, and it's the inner pulp that's sliced up like bread, and that's placed in the agave roasting pit to help provide moisture for the agave to keep it from drying out. So 4 direction stones are placed in the pit and a heart stone, and then it's lined with juniper wood, it's lit on fire, and you allow the coals to burn down for several hours. And once you get a nice layer of gray coals, then you place the barrel cactus slices on top. And then from there, you place the agave hearts on top of that. And of course, tinfoil was abundantly available in the pre-contact era, right? So you use tinfoil. Just kidding. Okay. In days gone by, people would use an animal hide, or sometimes they would use the leftover leaves, and they'd cover the mescal so it doesn't get dirty, because it's all going to be buried under earth. And it roasts for 24 hours, and then the following day, you dig it up, and it should be all cooked up. The roasted agave turns golden brown. It has a sweet, rich, smoky flavor. It's high in calcium and zinc. The roasted agave can be preserved by pounding it into these dried cakes similar to a fruit leather, or you can put it in the freezer and access it year-round. Banana yucca or yucca baccata is one of those species that sometimes people confuse with mescal agave. Probably not this group of botanists, you know the difference, but just to share a little bit about the differences, yuccas, they always have a smooth leaf margin, whereas the agaves have a serrated, jagged leaf margin. And the banana yuccas will flower year after year after year. They're not monocarpic like the agave. And of course, the yuccas have a special relationship with their moth pollinator. It's always an exciting time when you see the yucca blossoms because it means that there's a chance that there's going to be yucca fruit. And so, like a lot of desert plants, these species cycle, and so not every year you're really going to have a bumper crop. And so we kind of keep an eye on what's happening with the flower blossoms, and if you see a lot of the blossoms and they get pollinated and the circumstances are good, then you may get a bumper crop of fruit. But oftentimes it'll be 3 or 4 years before this happens. As you can see from these photos, the stars aligned and we got a good year of banana yucca fruit. And so we were out there fighting off the cattle to get to the fruit first. This is a nice photo because you can see what the fruit looks like when it's cut open, and when it's fully mature you get a lot of black seeds, and those can actually be used as jewelry, and so you can drill holes in those and make them into beads. But it's the pulpy part on the outside of the seed that's the edible part that tastes actually very similar to a banana. You can eat the fruit fresh, but it's also really good if you roast it. So here's the kids at the school roasting the banana yucca. So we had to tell the kids to hold hands and look cute because the fire guys were after us. We lit a fire on the school grounds to roast the banana yucca, but we forgot to get our fire permit. And in the modern era, that is a no, no, no. So anyhow, we managed to survive the ordeal, and the fire department is still our friend. Both the agave and yucca species are known for having very fibrous leaves. And so if you boil the leaves and scrape off the pith, you can yield the inner fiber, which can be used for many different purposes. Here you're taking bundles of the fiber and twining them to yield the rope. The yucca and agave fiber can be woven into yucca sandals, into hairbrushes, even into these long nets that were used for harvesting rabbits. And so one way to remember the Hualapai name of the banana yucca, which is called manat, is to realize if you're going to weave one of these 100-foot long nets, it's going to be a lot of monotonous work. The root is full of saponins, and so when you cut it open and apply friction, it lathers up just like soap. The desert willow is a beautiful shrub that you find growing along the washes, and the Hualapai uses for making a bow for bow and arrows. And so you harvest it when it's dormant in the fall or the winter time. If you were to harvest it in the spring, there's too much water and it could split as you try and work the material. The kids had a really great time making the bow and arrows. So did I. I made one for my little nephew when he was just a newborn. At Hualapai, we have the staghorn cholla, or Cylindropuntia acanthocarpa. Both yield an edible bud that can be harvested high in calcium. After the thorns are removed, the fruit can be eaten fresh or boiled.
Good morning. My name is Jorigine Paya, a Hualapai elder that is with the Hualapai Department of Resources and do work with the ethnobotany with the youth and adults. All right, here you see a slide of the Engelmann's prickly pear cactus, and with this, the Hualapai name for it is alau. And this cactus, you see the fruit on there, the tunis or the prickly pear. The Hualapais gather that, harvest that, and prepare that for edible, whether it be jelly or they would just dry it and out in the sunlight. And when it's fully dry, they would harvest, they would gather it and make juice. But before I go on to share another portion of this plant, I'd like to share a little short story of this cactus. It has been told and passed on that Coyote in stories were like he found a big orchard, a field of this cactus with fruit on it. And in mind, he thought he was the only one that found this plant to where he would harvest and gather and eat. So he didn't want the humans to harvest and eat this cactus, the fruit and the pads too. So what he did was he had in mind and approached a juniper tree and tore the bark off of the tree and went all over in the area where he found this big field of alav or the prickly pear cactus and was trying to throw them up in the air to where they would break apart and would land on the plant. And he saw that it did that and it formed some cacti on the both on the pad and the fruit. And he thought, seeing that, he thought in mind, oh, no humans are going to come and harvest this, for I'm going to be the only one to harvest and enjoy this edible plant. But his idea did not really work. For humans would go walking, hiking to see if they would find this plant, the cactus, and they had a good idea. On a windy day when they would go out, they would not face where the wind would come from. They would stand on the opposite side, and also a plant that they would gather, and the plant is called a rabbit brush. In Hualapai, we call that gohuayo. And they would brush the little stickers, the spines from the plant, and would throw them in on the ground first, and would use the sand to clean if it had any more of the stickers on there, they would clean it off and put it in a huge burden basket. And they would also do that with the pads. They would brush the spines or the stickers off, and the pads were also roasted, and they were cleaned, made sure there was no stickers on there, and they would roast that in open fire and would eat it the same way they did with the fruit. They would either eat it fresh, make a juice, or they did the same with the pads, would dry it out in the sunlight, and when they wanted to enjoy eating it, they would roast it on open fire, hot coals, and enjoy that out in the fields. Here in the slide, you see how the tools were used to harvest the fruit, and also the plant here you see is called the rabbit brush, the gohuayo. Here you see the Hualapai youth harvesting the tunis, the prickly pear fruit. Here they're making the prickly pear juice, hatenyahai. They're enjoying the prickly pear ice cream here. Two Hualapai elders enjoying the prickly pear yogurt here. The delicious prickly pear gummy bears here. You see here the nutritional benefits of the fruit also. The list here you see. Here's the pad of the prickly pear plant cactus. It's edible too, like I mentioned before, very delicious. Here in this slide you see the pine tree. In Hualapai we call it ko. Here you see a Hualapai elder and a youth making the pine nut butter, kotao. Here an elder is using a long pole to drop the pine cones or the pine nuts from the pine tree. To roast the to get the pine nuts from the cones, they roast the pine cones in open fire on top of hot coals. Here you see the process of how the pine nut butter is made. Here is how the pine sap is used for medicine, the pinyon sap, konai. This is Jarial, cliff rose. It's a very important shrub for our people, Hualapai. Ancestors harvest the cliff rose bark for clothing, as you see here, a shirt and a skirt. For our babies in the cradle board, they made pads like for a mattress, and also diapers for the infant, and also to start fire they would make it into like a form of matchstick. Hangyo,